Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final day of Translations 2022. We hope you've enjoyed the festival thus far, whether you watched it in person or virtually. It's been an amazing year, and that's in large part thanks to you. So we want to thank you for that. Before we get going with the show, I want to start by acknowledging that Translations and $3 Bill Cinema operate on the unceded ancestral lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Tulalip, Muckleshoot, Stillaguamish, and Coast Salish peoples. It's important for us to know that the Duwamish people are still here, as well as people from indigenous territories across Turtle Island, aka North America. You can find out whose land you're on by visiting native-land.ca. It's going to be scrolling on the bottom right there. That's native-land.ca. We also encourage you to consider paying real rent at realrentduwamish.org. That is also scrolling on the bottom. Thank you so much for being here. We're super excited to have BJ and Harmony from This Ends at Prom back. You might remember that they joined us for Seattle Queer Film Festival back in October. And, I could just keep droning on, but I am not the reason that anyone is going to be tuning in here. So I'm going to turn it over to BJ and Harmony.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. I really like this pose that I'm coming in.
I know you've got kind of like a nice little shoulder thing here.
I'm really leaning in. That's how you know that I'm involved.
Well, hi, friends. My name is BJ.
And I'm Harmony, the other Colangelo.
The other Colangelo. We are the Wives Colangelo, and we host a podcast every week called This Ends at Prom. It is a coming-of-age podcast specifically looking at teen girl movies from the cis and trans perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, we are doing something so exciting for Translations, and with $3 Bill Cinema, we are talking about a movie called Alice Jr. So Alice Jr. is a Brazilian film. And it came out in 2019, 2020, depending on festival schedules, but it is currently streaming on Netflix. So if you like the conversation today and you have not seen Alice Jr. for whatever reason, Netflix is kind of the one that's most accessible for a lot of people to see. I also know that a lot of people have a lot of big feelings about Netflix and some of their behaviors in recent years. So if you're like, F that, I don't have Netflix subscription, support the filmmakers, look up Alice Jr., rent it, buy it, do what you can to support it, because this movie is pretty incredible, I would like to think.
Yeah.
So this was a relatively new one for the two of us. So typically on our show, what we do is we'll talk about like our first time hearing about the film or watching it. But this is a new one for us. So that's not something that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, I would love to read you the IMDb synopsis of this movie. Because something that's really special, I think, about movie synopses on websites is that you either have people who care a whole lot about what the movie is about and will give you like the best description ever, or it is someone who is clearly phoning it in.
Mm-hmm.
So
let's see, which one do we have today? Place your bets.
The first kiss of a transgender teenager. That's what IMDb gave us.
Sure.
I mean,
that is a B plot to this, yes.
Right. So that's not as nice and as deserving of a synopsis as this movie should have. So Harmony, if you had to say like what Alice Jr. is about, what's this movie all about?
Alice is in a nice, large metropolitan area in Brazil with many people and is a former contestant on like a top model for teens show in which she got second. And dad studies pine cones and fragrances and needs to move to a small town. And by small, it's like 50,000 people. So it's still kind of big.
Yeah, it was like, that's
medium sized. But yes, so they have to move off into the country. And Alice has to enroll in a Catholic school. And it is, fish out of water.
Yes, absolutely. So
there you go. And also a first kiss subplot.
Yes, there's a first kiss subplot. Alice is sort of like a vlogger. That seems to be what she's done in her post-reality show career.
She's an influencer.
She's played by Ana Celestino Mauta. I do not speak Portuguese. there's a very good chance I'm going to be butchering names throughout this. My apologies to all involved. But she has kind of like this YouTube-y personality. We see her doing like live streams and recording things throughout the film. But what it also does is open up this really interesting narrative structure where it's sort of like Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where like emojis and there's graphics, like emojis and graphics and squiggly lines and like little heart outlines that are glowing will like pop up randomly throughout the movie, which I find really like compelling and very sweet.
Yeah.
And it kind of puts it very firmly in kind of like a Gen Z sort of framing.
It exists in there's two worlds that exist for Alice. There is her online personality, and then there's her real life personality. And when she was in a larger city, those met, and then they separated, and then they unfortunately met again by somewhat shitty circumstances.
Yeah, agreed completely. So typically with our show structure, the first thing that we want to do is kick off talking about our main teen girl. So let's talk about Alice. Honey, how do you feel about Alice?
She's great. She is, she doesn't take shit from anyone.
She really doesn't.
Which I think that the implication that you see in the beginning of it, where we see the end, like a clip of the end of the reality show that she is on, and she fights for the crown, and it's like really petty. It's kind of like the end of Miss Congeniality a little bit, where it's just like, that's mine, I will steal it. And a little dramatic, a little center of attention-y, and we don't really get that vibe from the rest of her character, but that seems to be like an implication because she streams. So there is this thing of building a mystique or a brand around her. And then she has to exist outside of that and outside of her comfort zone. And she doesn't really change. She just adapts. It's not really like an evolution of a person. It's more of like a revolution of a person.
That's a really good way to describe it. Something that I really like about Alice is she's very no nonsense.
Yeah,
she knows who she is. She's very sure of herself. And this is one of the few examples where we're getting like a teen trans story that first off is not a coming out story.
Oh, mercifully, it is not.
It's not a coming out story. She is here. She is trans. She knows who she is. And if you have a problem with it, like that's a whole lot of your issue to unpack.
Yeah.
And I think that is so refreshing.
Oh yeah, because it's not a coming out story, which, you know, everyone loves a coming out story unless you've seen every other coming out story. And then I'm just wishing for anything else at this point, because I've been in the game for a long time. But because it's not a coming out story, you get to see sort of the aftermath of it, and that it's not so much that like, oh, well, the old adage of gays and queers from our time is like, oh, it gets better because eventually it'll get better. And it's like, it doesn't get better. It gets easier. You still have to deal with like the same kind of stuff from awful people who don't appreciate you or accept you, but you get better at dealing with it.
Yeah.
And coming out stories don't have that. They only have the like immediacy, not the like the long-term parts of what coming out means.
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously speak to that far better than my cis ass can.
You have queer things.
So. I mean, yes, but I am also somebody who exists. I like to say that like my privilege is on a dimmer switch.
You're like the moon.
I'm like the moon.
You orbit me.
I get like secondhand transphobia from obviously being married to you and having to deal with like the intercommunal issues of like people who want to invalidate my queerness because you're a trans person.
That means you're not a real lesbian.
So I've been told on the internet. That's wrong. Anyone who says that to you is a jerk and they're a liar. So obviously, like, I can't speak to that, but I can definitely speak to the fact that Alice leaves this big city and where it's very cool that she's trans and people don't really have an issue. She has trans friends,
which you don't ever see.
You never see that.
Trans people tend to be like birds and they flock together, but movies don't like to think that happens.
No, every like teen movie, it's like, and here is our token trans character and our token character of color, and that's all we need. And it's like, this is not how friend groups work, but sure.
Well, they're in a small, there's not enough. There aren't enough trans people for them to be friends or for something.
Which is just obscene and stupid.
Yeah.
So she has like not only transfers her own age, but she also has like a trans elder that she like incorporates in her videos and she talks to all the time. And like that is really important to see, that we have not been seeing a lot of recently.
No.
Where this idea of having like your queer elders and the people that like help you through things. And we don't have like a hand-holding scene where it's like, and here is this elderly trans woman who clearly has helped Alice on her way. It's like, no, you're just supposed to infer that.
Yeah.
And I love that structuring so much.
Agreed. Also, just seeing an older trans person exist in this movie, it also kind of continues the theming of like, hey, things that happen after coming out. This is like the sequel series or whatever, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, that's really, really nice. And then she ends up going to a different city, and it's not as welcoming. It's not as affirming. She ends up in Catholic school, which I'm sure anybody watching who has gone through the Catholic school system, if you know, you know, and it's suddenly this like awful sort of shock. And that is a shock that I have gone through as somebody who was born and raised in the Chicagoland area and then moved to Cleveland, Ohio, where I have a lot of mixed feelings about Cleveland. But Ohio is Ohio, and it is not a great place. So it's very strange when you've lived somewhere where it's been like pretty fine to be queer and trans and it's not a big deal, to then go somewhere where suddenly it's a very big deal and everyone has a lot of feelings about it.
Oh yeah. I was having a conversation with somebody at work today about our nephew who just went to a queer prom recently, and they were like, oh yeah, you know, I'm from LA and I had a queer prom in my high school. And I'm like, okay, I need you to understand that this is like a tri-county school.
Right.
So every kid from ages like 2nd grade to graduation in 12th grade, all of them go to the same school for 3 counties in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest. I need you to understand this is not common.
Yeah, this is, 1, it's not common, and 2, like, it is dangerous, like straight up. Like, this is a part of Ohio that still has signs up that's like, Trump's still my president. Like,
it's really startling for people who are from like cities or from at least in any capacity, like even 50,000 people towns are still fairly large, just how small a lot of the country in even just America is. There's a graphic that I've seen going around right now where it's like, here's all the states that have a smaller population than Los Angeles County, and it's like 30 of them.
Right. So like that's part of that culture shock that Alice is dealing with of being somewhere where she has been affirmed, which again, like that alone is already groundbreaking because we never see that.
No, she's got great people in her life.
She's got wonderful people.
Her dad is so sweet.
Her dad deserves every award that you could possibly give to a supportive dad. Like he is so supportive and comfortable, and not in a way that feels like I'm not like a regular dad, I'm a cool dad. Like it's just genuine. And like he cracks jokes with her and like kind of mocks her sometimes in like a very playful way that like father-daughter relationships are when they're healthy.
Like there's a lot of these things where this is one of the defining characteristics I feel like of this movie, which is that I've seen enough trans stories. I've seen enough like teen trans stories. I've seen enough coming out stories that I can recognize patterns. And I sort of am trying to predict like, oh, where's this movie going to go? And it doesn't do any of them, to the point where it's almost like, I don't want to say that it's plain, but there's no forced drama. There's no like humongously terrible conflicts. Like there's teen drama conflicts, which like for me is, I'm freaking 30. So it's like, oh, well, that's not the worst thing in the world. I've seen way worse in a trans story. So it's refreshingly sweet. Like there's a moment where where Alice and her dad are driving in their car and he's listening to something like soothing, like smooth jazz or something. I don't know.
Some like adult contemporary.
Something dads listen to. I don't know. So she just goes, nope, I had a day, and puts on some rock music, and he reaches for the radio, and I think, oh, well, this is a dad in a teen movie. He's going to like switch it back. It's going to be like a goofy movie, and they're going to go back and forth. No, they have a great relationship. He turns it up, and they just like vibe while they go down the road. Yeah,
he cranks it up. He's like, clearly my child is needing to get something out, so I'm going to be there to let her know it's okay.
I'm cool dad.
Yeah.
I like, if the music's too loud, you're too old. I'm not too old.
And like, I hate how revolutionary this is, because it shouldn't be. It should
No.
not be revolutionary that you
No.
give a shit about your kids. But that is the unfortunate reality that so many queer people have to deal with, especially trans people.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey, happy Mother's Day. We're recording this on Mother's Day. And Alice does not have, a mother is not present. We learn that she's passed away.
Mhm.
And part of why she calls herself Alice Jr., which I think is very sweet, is she uses the name from Alice in Wonderland. So the storybook character, it's something that meant a lot between her and her mom. But she's kept Junior as part of her name because when before she transitioned, she was named after her dad, and she was, dad's name Junior. So she sort of like combined the two of them and become Alice Jr., which I think is so sweet. And like, just, shout out to dad for being so good. Like, if you're that good of a dad that your kid wants to like keep part of like the masculine name, I think is really saying something about what a wonderful father he is.
He's wonderful. I mean, he goes to town with, I guess, what is that, like the headmistress of the Catholic school, that's just whoever that old lady is, and just ends up like throwing a phone in her face and be like, here's my lawyer. Anyway, we're about to have some words.
Yeah.
And the lawyer's also really supportive. Like there's good people in the support network. Like Alice has a great lawyer through her dad, got a great dad. There's one good teacher, like a cool network of friends. Like there's some cool, solid people. And all it takes is basically don't be a butthole.
Like, it's so easy.
It's so easy to not be a butthole.
Like, you were talking about this movie being refreshingly sweet, and I think that this movie works because it's also refreshingly pedestrian.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Another trans film that I love that is often overlooked is from the early 70s. It's a British film called I Want What I Want. And the way I describe that film to people is that nothing happens and it's pleasant. Like, there's a story of someone transitioning and there's no horrible like exploitation tragedies. It's just kind of like, here's me and I'm going through my life and I know who I want to be and that's it. And it's just pleasant.
I mean, the ending has a little bit of a trope, but it's
like
also
barely.
It's the 70s, and it's kind of par for the course.
Exactly. But like, this is also 50 years ago.
Right.
And so describing like a movie that doesn't fall into any of the tropes of movies we would see, for decades and decades and decades since that, it's very plain and pleasant. And this is almost that sort of vibe, but for a modern teen.
Yeah. And it's dealing, like, I like that you said that it doesn't have forced drama, because the conflicts that exist are very like teenage conflicts.
Yeah.
Alice has never kissed somebody and really wants to kiss somebody. I also love the normalization of like, oh yeah, I've never kissed anybody. Like, it's not about losing your virginity. It's not about that typical like high school trope. It's just like, no, I've never kissed anybody and I want to be able to do that. And that, I think that's like a very sweet thing. And it's a very like natural inkling to want someone to want to kiss you.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And then the issues that Alice are dealing with is like having to deal with like teachers and principals who are not affirming, and like being in a school system that's not affirming, having fellow classmates that are not affirming. And it's treated very matter of fact. Like, it's not presented like, oh, hey, straight people, look how hard it is to be trans. This is why you should support trans people, because like, look at how sad this is. That's not the energy it's bringing. Like, it's very matter of fact of like, yeah, this is day-to-day life and it sucks and it's a lot harder.
This is normal.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that I'm trying to describe. Like, that's the word I want for this movie, and I Want What I Want, which is not that they're plain or they're pedestrian. They're normal.
It's very slice of life.
Yeah, and I feel like describing a movie as normal isn't really a good pitch, but like that's when so much of it is just god awful tragedy.
Right.
Normal is nice.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And when she first arrives at school, like there are a couple things that this movie does really well that I want to highlight. So one, Alice does not like fall into any of the stereotypical tropes. And when people say like kind of, they don't necessarily have the worst intentions behind what they're saying, but like, it's not the correct phrasing. For example, her friend Bruno like says like, oh, well, when I first saw you, I didn't even know you were trans.
Yeah.
And rather than just letting that be a thing, she's like, hey, just so you know, like, that's not an okay thing to say to a trans person. And that falls into like these weird things about how I have to be beautiful in order to be seen as like a woman.
Yeah, the only way that I'm recognized as a woman is if I don't look like I'm trans.
Yeah.
Which is...
And I was like,
yeah.
Oh, we're actually, a movie's having this conversation? This is, okay, I like this.
Yeah.
And the fact that he takes that and accepts it and like, he apologizes. He's like,
Bruno's a good dude.
He's a good dude. He's like
Bruno.
He's like, yeah, you're right.
He's got a moped. He's a cool kid.
So like that's going on. The first like real friend I would say that Alice makes, Vivian gets there.
Yes. She gets her foot in the door first, but she's not invited.
Yeah, she's not invited first. Because the first person that she really talks to is Vivian, and Vivian wants to be a journalist. She works for the school paper.
She has more of a fascination with her.
She's really invasive, like right off the bat, which is like, girl, calm down.
And also, speaking of bad terminology, is like, I'm here with a trans.
Yeah, she's like, I'm here with the transgender. And it's just like, Vivian, no.
She's doing her best.
Right. And obviously Alice helps her along the way because she knows like she doesn't mean harm.
Yeah.
She just doesn't know any better. So she kind of walks her through that, which, you know, she doesn't have to do that. Google is free, but the fact that she takes the time to do that, I think is like important to see. Yeah. It's a great way to like teach, I guess, cis people how to like not be that person.
Yeah.
And I think you need to watch somebody like mess up to learn from it sometimes. But the first like real friend she makes is Thaisa, who I am very obsessed with. This character, this performer. I did the little, I don't know if you can see on this, I did the little dot eyes that she does because I was like, oh, that's a really cute look. So I did that today. But
theming.
She sees Alice, and Alice has been forced to wear the men's uniform at school because Catholic school.
And it's very baggy and awful. And then we get to see
it's terribly fitting.
That many trans people have learned how to sew.
Yes. Like that was another thing. She was like started tailoring her thing, and we're sitting right next to our own sewing machine
in their Tom of Finland basement.
Yes. So yeah, we were really excited to see her like sewing. We're like, yeah, because that's a thing.
Yeah, tailor it, make it look good.
But when she meets Thaisa, they have this very sweet exchange where she realizes pretty quickly that Thaisa is like not weirded out by her, and she thinks that like it's fine. And Alice acknowledges that she needs to readjust her tuck. And I don't know about you, like that is a thing that usually is not addressed in a movie like this.
Yeah.
Like I've definitely seen it in films that are a bit campier or a bit like more over the top, where then it's like that becomes the punchline or becomes like the statement piece is talking about.
But in this movie, it's normal.
It was just like, hey, can you block this? I got to adjust this real quick.
Well, it's specifically like a part that we're kind of like glossing over in this situation is that Alice can't use the bathroom because the like cranky headmistress lady who rules over the Catholic school, like the Trunchbull, her niece is just like, you're not allowed to use the ladies' room. And that means Alice is not going in the men's room because she's a winner. She's not going to admit defeat and do that. So then she just doesn't go to the bathroom. So there's nowhere else for her to adjust than just out and around.
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to pull that after this scene just because that goes places. But it's like so nice that Thaisa like immediately is like, yeah, let me like stand here and like kind of block you, because I think we see that so frequently in like coming of age like cis movies where it'll be like, oh my god, there's period blood on your pants, like here, block me so I can like fix this, or
dude, I have a boner,
right? Like these are things that happen all the time. So to see it so normalized in this coming of age movie about a trans girl, I was like, wow, that's really nice. Like, and it just kind of goes to show like how easy it is. Like it doesn't have to be tragedy porn.
No.
People can really take some messages from this movie.
No, this movie is a great example for like, I think Alice is going to be a marvelous example of young trans people finding a really good person in fiction to look up to. There's this thing that I'm seeing right now, and I can point to an example in this movie where we're starting to get enough trans cinema that it is becoming self-referential and weaving into its own genre. Like Alice has a Tangerine poster on her wall in her bedroom, which is like a kind of adult movie.
Yeah.
But that's also one of the best trans movies ever made, like hands down top 5 without argument. And you see like, oh, well, this meant something to Alice. And then eventually this is going to boil down. You're going to have people who are going to go, oh, well, Alice Jr. is a movie that meant a lot to me. And for young trans people, I think that's important. But also just for cis people, this is a great example of like, you don't want to be like that shitty bully. You don't want to be like these bad teachers. You don't want to be like this cranky old lady who's been wearing the same perfume for 20 years. You don't want to be any of those people. Just be the good. It's so easy. You know what makes people feel bad, and you know what makes people feel good. Don't do the things that make them feel bad. It's so easy. This is a good example of just learning by observing.
Yes.
Without having to be lectured or talked down to. It's a very sweet, casual movie in like basically trans etiquette 101.
Yeah, very much so. And so getting into the, I guess, like the major conflict of the movie. So as you discussed, Alice doesn't get to use the bathroom at school. And I do want to highlight, I love the fact that the nieces who are blocking the bathroom are also fat girls, because as a fat girl, I don't get a lot of representation in teen movies either. And if I do, it's usually like some sad ass story. And the fact that they're like bullies, I was like, look at you, representation. Fat people can be mean too.
Yeah.
Love it.
Like what's the one's name? Big Rhonda or something? She's great. Then she DJs later. She gets redemption.
Yeah, a lot of the kids that are being a little assholes, they do get a redemption arc, which I think is sweet. But you kind of need that. It's a teen trope.
Kids make mistakes, and then they learn that they were buttholes.
Yes. And I think that it's good. Normalize making mistakes and having the room for redemption and growth.
Yeah, especially for teens, because
so
we were all stupid when we were 15.
We were all idiots when we were teenagers. The only difference is now it's all being documented and it can be kept forever. And I think we need to have, that's an entirely other conversation. We have to have a cultural reckoning with that like real fast.
Yeah.
But we have Alice being denied the bathroom, which is not acceptable in any stretch of the imagination. And unfortunately, that does lead to an accident in school, which is...
And it gets
mortifying.
And put on YouTube. I believe it's under like the title of like...
It's like Piss Pants.
Tranny Peas Pants or something like that in
it's
school.
Like
it's real awful. Clickbaity and mean. And unfortunately, at least within their school, it goes kind of viral, and people start sharing the video on her live streams. And now these worlds have reconnected, unfortunately, in a bad way.
And I think that there's also something to be said about how this movie handles social media and the idea that there are kind of two different worlds for a lot of queer people to exist in, with the real world, which is very much a heterosexist space, where everything is made, like, it has been by design to make us feel excluded. And then online, you can kind of curate that. You can have like your community and your people. And when the worlds combine for Alice, it's like it's really traumatizing for her, because that sucks. Nobody wants that. So I was wondering, Harmony, if you could kind of talk a little bit about like the difference between like online queer spaces versus like real life queer spaces.
Oh gosh,
I know that's like a big question.
Online's queer spaces, first of all, like when I came out, they didn't exist. So only with like the advent of social media, and even I would say more so with the rise of Tumblr, and now more recently TikTok, like the much more I guess progressive, the left-leaning social media platforms, you've been able to find a community. The more chaotic trans people end up on Twitter. Hi. But you're able to find people and interact with them and build a worldview that is not reality, but it could be a version of reality. I'd say, specifically speaking of America, because this is not a film that's based on our continent at all.
No.
But as we were saying earlier, like Los Angeles is wildly different than like rural Midwest. So you'll have wildly different results. I mean, even if you were to probably walk around Los Angeles, which is a big city, it's the second biggest in the country, some neighborhoods are going to be better than others. Some are going to be worse. You might get yelled at, called a slur from a car in some neighborhoods, and other ones, everyone might think that you're the bee's knees. there is a certain level of life that you're able to curate, but the unfortunate reality is that trans people need to exist in a way in reality that there's no trans spaces. There's queer spaces, but queer spaces aren't often tailored towards transness, especially with like current hostilities towards transness going on a legal level. It's trying to. There's always the threat of hostility that exists for trans people, because transphobia exists in every city, in every group of people, regardless of any circumstance, anywhere in the world. So you never really know, are you cool? You just kind of have to build yourself up, because you got to be prepared for the worst. And sometimes that's easier depending on where you are, and sometimes it's not. I personally don't trust anyone until they prove that they can be trusted. So yeah.
And like, I know
it's a big question you dumped on me that I had to like figure out my way through. Thank you.
But I think that that's something that's really important to think about. Is a lot. I know a lot of people think that that's like very pessimistic, or like maybe even nihilistic to think about.
I'm just jaded.
But I also do think that like there is an aspect of like, we all also want everyone to survive and like be able to live their best life, and like that does mean taking into consideration like the realities of the outside world. Like, I love like the curated online community that I have through like TikTok and social media of like my like-minded queer friends. Like, that's great. But like, I can't take them with me everywhere that I go. Like, I can take the conversations we have, I can take the things that we've learned from each other and like take that as like solace with me, but that's not going to magically make somebody like affirm your gender. Like that having all of those experiences aren't going to make like weird cashier at a gas station like not be an asshole. Like that's, you have to learn to prepare with those things. And I think watching Alice have to come to terms with like how these worlds are now colliding, because they do spam her live stream with the video of her at school, where like she's not this like cool, confident fashionista with like all the answers and great advice like she is on the internet. People are seeing her like at her most vulnerable. And like, that's difficult. Like, having to be able to allow people to see like the full person of you is really hard. And I think it's even harder for trans people, where everything is nitpicked so severely to the point where like you could be denied like affirming medical attention if you don't appear or act a way that a doctor thinks that you should. So like, it gets into these like really complicated situations. But I love that Alice Jr. like presents those realities and that like that difficulty as so matter of fact. Like, it doesn't present it as like the central conceit of like, oh, this big tragedy, everybody be sad about it. It's like, this is just how it is. And like, this is how we got to survive. And this is how we got to get through it. And that is like, it's not just destigmatizing it, it's normalizing it. And that's so important. Because I genuinely can't think of another movie where you get to see that, especially for a teenager.
No, I mentioned that I don't trust people till they give me a reason to trust people. I also mentioned earlier that this movie sort of sets up a bowling pin and then never knocks it down. There's a lot of moments in this movie where I just assume the worst out of everyone in their school. Like when those girls invite Alice to their pool party. I'm like, uh-oh. They're like, don't worry, we saw you on like Top Model or whatever, and we were voting for you and we think you're great. I assume the worst. I assume like, oh, they're gonna bully her. This is some
I had the
setup.
same thing. Like, I immediately had like fight or flight kick in, and I was like, they're gonna humiliate her at a pool party. It's gonna be so bad, because we've seen how these stories play out.
I've seen teens be mean.
Right. Like, either in real life of just like teens being shitty, or in movies where like you have these like awful tropes where you expect like, oh, this is gonna be that scene where suddenly like the bikini comes off and blah blah blah, and like we do
they're gonna push her in the pool and then expose her,
right? And like, something shitty does happen at the pool party,
but it's from the person that we already know is a jerk.
It's from a person we already know is a jerk.
She already got in a fight with this boy and he's mad about it. Honestly, I think he's mad that he got beat up by a trans person, and that's really why he's like, I must humiliate you, I've been emasculated. So there's that. But to speak of like trans people having to be perfect, this is a very good-natured movie. Everyone's very kind and it's very sweet, and that it feels good. But like, again, it sets things up where she has to be the best. She had to be like on a TV show for these two girls to think that she was cool. She has to have connections with like this fashion person who she's modeled clothes for, in order for this like other gay kid who's not a fan of her to appreciate her. She has to have connections. It needs to be seen as cool by being beautiful and successful, and that's sort of what breaks down this barrier for some of these people. And I think teens are fickle, and they just probably think that oh, that's cool, and then they get in the foot in the door and they go, oh no, you're actually cool outside of this though, because this is a good-natured film. But in a different movie, that's what this would be. Trans people aren't allowed to fail. I have to be better than everyone in any field I've ever been in, because people are looking for reasons to discredit me, looking for reasons to fire me, looking for reasons to nitpick me for any reason at all that they wouldn't anyone else, especially in like small towns.
No, absolutely. And I think that what makes this movie so good is that it does establish that, but then at the same time, the gay student in school, like, she obviously kind of clocks him immediately and is like, aha,
game
like,
recognizes game.
Like, here is an ally, here is somebody that I can be trusted with. And you can tell he's like, I have been maintaining a low profile and not being bullied for being gay. If you hang out with me, you're putting a target on my back, like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So like, that is his motivation for not wanting to like be friends with her at first, which obviously we know like that's messed up. But at the same time, it's like, they're teenagers and it's a survival tactic. Like, I understand the mindset of why you're being shitty in this situation. I don't approve of it. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. So we've got that going on. But what is so interesting to me is she also is imperfect, though.
Yeah.
When they're like, the mean kids are bullying the gay kid, even though he like has made it very clear, like, hey, leave me alone. Alice stands up for him and like punches a dude in the face. Like, he goes to hit her. She like dodges it and then just boom, like blasts him. And I don't ever get to see justified like trans anger or trans violence or like any of that, because we get into this like weird territory where it's like, well, we don't want to show people like justified anger, like we don't want to show trans people with justified anger or like retaliation, because then it paints trans people as like violent or like, oh, look at what this happened. Right. You don't want to present people who are already like so marginalized and at such risk as threats. But like, if this were any other teen movie in the world, that is exactly how that would play out. Like, that kid would get punched in the face. And, even Alice's dad like yells at her afterwards because she gets like suspended for 3 days.
It's like, use your wits, don't use violence.
He's like, use your wits, have a conversation. Like, I raised you better.
Dad, you dork. As soon as you say something like violence is never the answer, then people are going to come be violent to you.
Right. So like, he's saying all this to her, and then she like kind of comes back at him, and she's like, that's really easy for you to say, like, cis white guy.
Yeah. Because
her dad is white, and like, we know that her mom is not, and she's mixed race. So she's right though. Like, she's 100% right. Like, sometimes people are not afforded the luxury or the privilege of being non-confrontational because it literally is life or death. It is like fight or flight. Like, those are the options.
Yeah.
And I like that this movie acknowledges that, like, that not everybody gets that opportunity. And Alice is like, yeah, I had to do something, like, because if I didn't, it was going to continue and it was going to get worse. And the thing is, she's right.
Yeah.
She's 100% right.
You give a mouse a cookie and then they beat your ass every day.
I'm not sure if that's how the expression goes.
That's how that works, right?
So, we have this kid that she like punched in the face, and it's alluded to that she broke his nose.
Yeah.
He's the one at the pool party who does something not very nice. He ends up taking her top and throwing her into the pool. And like, we both had this moment where we were watching these kids like trying to like throw her in the pool, and we were like, and this is why Angela Baker killed those kids in sleepaway camp.
Yeah.
Don't throw trans women in the water when they don't want to be. That's rude.
Yeah.
So she ends up in the pool and she just like kind of sinks because you can tell she's just like, I just don't know what to do in this situation.
She doesn't have a top, so she's just like, well, as soon
Yeah.
as I go up, I have to confront that. But what if I just stay down
What
here?
if I just stay down here?
What if it's like Ferris Bueller and I'm just Cameron and I just stay at the bottom of the pool?
Right. So she kind of, she has a Cameron moment, but then what ends up happening where we both kind of were like about is all of the other girls join in and they lose their tops and they jump in the pool with her and they're like, yeah, you did this to one of us, so we're all gonna stand together and y'all can leave.
Yeah.
And the guys get kicked out and then it becomes kind of like this wonderful like bonding of sisterhood and it's very sweet and it's like a really nice moment of solidarity of like, if you're going to be humiliated, then we're going to humiliate ourselves, so then therefore no one has to feel humiliated.
Look at this good example of modern feminism that includes trans people. Look how easy that was.
It's
so easy.
Like, it's so frustrating when you watch it because you're like, it's right here. Like, the instructions are right here.
Yeah.
And these children have figured it out.
Yeah.
So we've got all that going on. So after kind of the pool party, it becomes very apparent that like Alice has built this like community. She and Valerie are like good friends now. She has her great friendship with Thaisa and Bruno. And there's like this like sort of like will they won't they like throuple-y vibes that kind of go on
a little bit. So it's a bit of a love triangle, but maybe two of those sides aren't connecting. It's more like a love V. It's like, oh no, there might be a secret connection we didn't know about. There might actually be a triangle.
Yeah.
Dare I say a pink triangle?
Because what we have is like Alice has a crush on Bruno, but Bruno is dating Thaisa, but then like Thaisa has this like from the get-go she has queer vibes. Like the second I saw her I was like,
she's got short platinum blonde hair.
I was like, that's a queer girl, I can see you. And then it was like, I'm dating Bruno and I was like,
oh, maybe she's just
okay,
punk,
maybe she's just alternative. I know
she's got
sometimes
tattoos.
Hipsters have made it like really confusing. Like this haircut used to be like lesbian and now people are like, oh, do you like Neutral Milk Hotel? And I'm like, yes, but that's not the point. So we kind of have this like waffling energy, and right when Alice has finally like really found herself in the school and has sort of like started this revolution where everybody's being affirming and like pushing back against the school, her dad is like, surprise, I figured out how to get the magic smell out of this pine cone for the perfume company I work for. We're gonna move back to the big city.
Aren't you excited? And
she's like,
I got drunk and breathed on a pine cone and now there's flowers.
And like she's conflicted about it because obviously she loves the way that her life once was, but she's found this like little community and she's like found the like her people, and she's gonna have to leave them. So of course, because dad is a G, he's like, well, we're gonna throw the biggest going away party possible.
That's not what he says. She says, can I have a party? He says, not too many people.
Fair.
So then I guess he just goes along with it, but he does not recommend the biggest rager in this tiny town.
Well, it turns out to be the biggest rager in this tiny town.
Yeah.
And we have like the girl who was once a bully is now DJing. Everybody comes up and there's just glitter and eyelashes and everybody looks awesome.
We see a moment early on when she has to go to the Catholic school and she's like, well, they're going to look at me anyway. I might as well make a statement. And it's like, hey, what did you wear to Euphoria High?
Right.
And now you have everyone dressed like they're going to Euphoria High. So maybe this is a touch more common than people our age like to be critical of for Euphoria and its fashion choices.
And Vivian does this with her hair, which is why I did it, because I watched it and I was like, you know what?
Damn.
I was like, now is the day. I'm gonna figure out how to do that like bubble hair piece. I'm gonna do it. And I figured it out. Thank you, TikTok teens, for your tutorials. You helped this old dog learn some new tricks. So they have this big party and everything is fun. They play a game of suck and blow,
which I've never played, but I only ever see it in movies.
I have played it many a time. I'm very good at it. I'm undefeated at this point.
How do you even win this game?
You get it all the way to the end, and I've never dropped the paper.
What do you mean you're undefeated? It's a team sport.
I mean, that's true, but I've never been the result of it losing. I always do what I'm supposed to.
Yeah, maybe we lose, but I don't lose.
Yeah. So if you don't know what suck and blow is, it's also in the movie Clueless, which is fun, where you have a piece of paper and you suck the piece of paper and then you pass it to someone else and they try to like vacuum it off of you, and you lose if the paper drops and then you end up kissing somebody, which means people lose on purpose all the time.
Half the fun.
So they're playing Suck and Blow, and the paper drops, and Alice kisses Bruno. And they pull away, and she's like a big smile because she's like, "Oh yay, first kiss!"
I kissed Bruno. I've had a crush on Bruno this whole time, and also there was this kind of like, "Oh no, Thaisa and Bruno have been fighting. I think it's because Bruno likes me." And oh no, am I hurting my best friend that's not Vivian, my other best friend, by being into her guy? And we're just like, "Oh, this is terrible." And then they're making out on the dance floor and shit. And then there's a surprise.
So what happens is that after the Suck and Blow game happens, like, Thaisa looks really upset.
Yeah.
Naturally, as one would expect.
Kissed my boyfriend.
Right. So she goes upstairs into the bathroom and like is upset, and Alice goes in and is like, "I'm really sorry. It was just a game. Like, it didn't
It's not
mean
even
anything.
a real first kiss.
It's not even a real first kiss." And then Thaisa goes for it, and they are making out in the bathroom, and I like jumped out of my skin, and I was like, "Fucking knew it!" Like, I was so excited. Because not only do you never get to see like trans joy, you never get to see like cis trans like queer girls like being cute together. Like, like there's like 5 instances of it, and they're all either like really sad and depressing, or it's like blink and you'll miss it. Like, it's just like a thing in the background. Like, it's not a big deal. And this is like a huge deal because you can tell like when that happens, like when they're done kissing, like Alice has this like revolution where she's just like, oh, revelation's the word I actually wanted. But she has this revelation where she's like, oh, because people forget trans people can also be victims of compulsory heterosexuality. That is not a cis exclusive thing.
No.
So we've had this whole movie where we have Alice believing that like she's straight and she's into guys and blah, blah, blah. And then she has the kiss. And it's like, well, a whole new world has just been opened up for me. And I think that that is so sweet and so lovely and just gives me all the warm fuzzies, because as a queer girl who loves a trans girl, it's really nice to see.
Oh, it's me. Yes.
It's you. Yes.
Oh, yeah. No, it's very, again, this movie is so sweet, and it sets up expectations, because I feel like they have to know all of the most obvious things in trans cinema and go, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen. I know exactly what's going to happen in the tropes of teen cinema. I know all of these things. And they're going to have a fight, and it's going to be a sad teen drama, because this movie is like 85 minutes long. So no, they've got time for a fight still at the end of the 3rd act. No, It's love.
So on our like regular recorded episodes for our shows, we do tend to look up what like other film critics or people have said about the movies, just so that it's not just our opinions. And Drew Gregory over at Autostraddle, if you're not reading Drew, what are you doing with your life? She reviewed this and just completely encapsulates how we feel about it. So it's like, when cool girl Thaisa was introduced, I immediately clocked her as queer. Same. But I clock people in movies as queer all the time, to no avail. Also same. The spark between Alice and Thaisa could have been a spark between Anne Celestino Moda and Surya Amitrano, who plays Thaisa. I didn't dare hope for more. And then it's revealed that Thaisa is dating Alice's new crush, Bruno, and that seems to be that. Friends, rivals, but not lovers? Of course not. As rare as it is to find good trans representation, it's even rarer to find good queer trans woman representation. Drew has written about this extensively. You can go to Autostraddle and read that. It's like, in fact, I watched the film panicked that at the end that maybe Alice would end up kissing her bully, or God forbid the movie take a tonal shift and end in her death, because these are the depths of what I've come to expect. And it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Just assume that this movie is going to bum you out.
Right. So when Alice and Bruno peck in the kissing game and Thaisa stormed off, I let out a sigh of relief and disappointment. I guess there was still part of me that hoped for a throuple or some queerness, but that desire retreated back to reality. But then Alice went into the bathroom, and Alice apologized to Thaisa, and then, all caps, Thaisa kissed Alice, but then they were making out. I jumped off my bed screaming like I had just witnessed an against all odds game-winning moment from my favorite sports team. Do you all realize how rare and unexpected that was? Boy Meets Girl has a sex scene between a trans woman and a cis woman, but it leads to her ultimate romance with a cis man. Adam has a queer trans woman we see with various people, but it's just a subplot. Glenn or Glenda focuses on a trans woman engaged to a cis woman, but it's complicated by its 1950s POV. So Pretty has trans feminine people in relationships with each other, but its intentions are far more abstract than romance. Bit has a vampiric meet cute and a casual relationship between a trans woman and a cis woman, but it's not the focus of the film.
And then they throw her off a roof.
And they throw her off a roof. And Better Than Chocolate and a handful of other movies have trans women with queer romances, but they're all played by cis men. And that's it. I just listed all of the queer trans women in the history of feature films. So, like, yes, like, this movie is doing so much just, like, earth-shatteringly, like, brilliant work in terms of its theming, the conversations it's having, the messages that it's doing, the not falling into tropes that exist in every trans film, and then just giving joy, and like it gives you like the good feelings of like a very, very good team movie, but it just happens to be about a trans girl, and it's just like,
and it's just
it's
normal.
just so normal, and it's so nice.
Yeah. It's so, I love also that this movie doesn't really celebrate itself by saying like, look at all these groundbreaking things that we've done.
Yeah.
Isn't it an event that we did this just so that we could say we did it? It's just kind of like, no, that's just where the story went.
Yeah.
It's almost like they wrote characters and then they wrote a plot that would fit those characters, and this is where it went, and it feels perfectly normal.
Yes.
And perfectly natural, and they're not just patting themselves on the back.
Absolutely. So this was written by Adriel Nazir Silva, story by Louise Bertazzo, and directed by Gil Baroni. All of them deserve all the flowers because Alice Jr. is absolutely incredible. And like the true shame that I think exists is that because this is an international film for American audiences, I am like really sad thinking about how many people are missing out on this movie because they either like can't deal with like subtitles.
Was it the 1-inch barrier?
Yeah, the 1-inch barrier, as Bong Joon-ho calls it. I am so fearful that people are not going to see this movie when it deserves to be seen, because this is one of those movies where it is so good and the representation is so wonderful and everything about it works so well that like it needs to be part of like the teen movie canon. Like this is one of the best coming of age movies I've ever seen. Like this is on the same level to me as something like Lady Bird. Like it's there. And there are so many people, even within like queer spaces, who have never heard of this movie. And it's solely because it's Brazilian and it's not American. And I'm just like, please read subtitles for the love of God. This movie is so wonderful and it will like change your life. Like, please, this is like, I'm not even a trans person, and like watching this, I was like, this is a movie that I wish I could have had as a teenager. Like, I genuinely wish I would have, because it would have, like, watching Thaisa would have helped me like unpack so many of the things that I felt as an adult. Like, being able to do that as like a high school student and like unpack it then, it's way easier because the stakes are so much lower than when you're an adult. And it's like, do I blow up my entire existence and life to be with somebody that I love? The answer is yes. The answer always yes. Blow up your life. It works. But like being able to navigate those feelings as a teenager would have been so much easier. I would have had a curfew on that shit. It would have been great.
This is absolutely something I would have loved to have seen. Now, granted, I came out as trans like 13 years ago, so this was very
old lady.
It's a very different world. We didn't have a whole lot going on in the way of trans cinema then, but I think a lot of the best trans movies ever made are international releases. Funeral Parade of Roses, a personal favorite of mine, 20 Centimeters, like so many others. And I think that there is just a deep, deep wealth of trans cinema that exists internationally. And yet we just go, but what about the Danish Girl?
So sorry to anybody who loves that movie. I understand you cannot choose which movies are like important to you.
God, Eddie Redmayne is my cinematic arch enemy, and I hate him. I hate him so much. Personally, professionally, he's the worst singer in Les Mis.
See, that's saying something. There's a lot of people in that movie who
he
can't
sings
sing.
Like with the back of his nose, but not in like a Ray Romano way. It's weird. I hate Eddie Redmayne so much.
So yes, Alice Jr. Better than the Danish Girl.
Well,
by like a
would
lot.
would I rather eat like at a nice restaurant or go fish through their dumpster?
But I think it's also
Their dumpster that was nominated for an Academy Award.
I think that it's also very important to note, though, that Alice Jr. isn't just like a great trans film.
No.
This is a great teen film
Yeah.
across the board.
It's lovely.
And you can trust us because we've been analyzing teen cinema from the 70s to stuff that came out this year and everything in between, things that were made for teen girls, things that were trying to explore the profit of teen girls, weird sex comedies. Like, we have covered them all. Alice Jr. is one of the best, like absolutely one of the best.
Yep.
So to take part of our show's theme and kind of our traditional format, Harmony, I already know the answer, but I'm asking anyway. Alice Jr. is asking you to the prom. Is it a yes, a no, a maybe, or are you buying a ticket for the movie so they can go on their own?
It's a yes.
I figured. We can add that to our list of movies that get to go to the prom.
Yes, the list that doesn't actually exist. It's just more of a hypothetical list in our minds.
Like we have like a letterboxd of the movies we've covered.
Yeah, but they aren't organized. They're just
or rated.
They're chronological. It's not organized by our rating system.
Yes, absolutely. So why does this get a yes from you?
Because it's just easy. Like, life shouldn't be easy. Being trans shouldn't be easy, but being a good person's easy. Making a movie that doesn't exploit decades-old tropes of trans cinema is easy. Just don't do the thing that you want to do for the sake of drama.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just pleasant. It's refreshing. It's just a lovely, like, modern teen film, and it doesn't feel... like here's a great example.
Okay.
We watched a She's All That remake recently.
He's All That with
He's
Addison
All
Rae.
That. That is a horribly cringy take on like the social media influencer modern teen story. And it feels out of touch. It feels unpleasant. This feels great. This is cozy and great and funny and like empowering. It's just an all around good film. Like, it's no notes.
Beautiful.
The only praises.
I love that. Well, I hope that y'all have enjoyed listening to us wax poetic about this movie that we clearly both very much love. It would not have been fun if we would have like watched a movie that we don't like and then just sat here and chat on a movie for an hour. Like, nobody needs that. Nobody wants that. The world is too depressing on its own. We do not need to add to that. So
if the Danish Girl is a teen movie, we would.
Yeah. So I hope that this has inspired you to check out Alice Jr. if you have not seen it, because it's amazing and it deserves all of your love. If you have enjoyed what we have done here today, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. This Ends at Prom is our name. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/This Ends at Prom, where Harmony comes up with really rad playlists. We announce the shows ahead of time. We do a bonus episode on like a random topic every month. We do the Sadie Hawkins dance, where Harmony makes me watch teen boy movies.
Yeah. We did Porky's recently. That was interesting.
That movie has aged like milk in the sun. It is rough pumpkins. And then we also do a series called TV Homecoming, where we are currently making our way through Pen 15 and talking about our different junior high experiences and the ways that they are similar and the ways that they are very much not. So you can support us over there. Or we are also on Twitter and Instagram at This Ends at Prom. I am on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at BJ Colangelo.
And I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Velocitraptor, Velosa_trap_tour. I think it'd be very funny if my like handle was the other Colangelo. Because let's be honest, that's me.
I feel like, I don't know, my dad might be like, I'm the OG Colangelo, though.
So then you're the other Colangelo?
I guess I would be the other Colangelo. We'll see. But
we'll text him after this.
He'll give us the final word. But thank you again so very much for checking us out, for supporting Translations Film Festival, for supporting $3 Bill Cinema, for doing everything you can to be here. We love you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have the best possible life that you could be living. And that's all we got.
Yeah, I can't top that. There you go. That was that.